Yeah, I think going back to Cuba, in the lead up to today's US planned whatever it is that they were trying to do there, which could just be a false flag in the days to come. They were just making so many different statements. And last week, Foreign Minister of Cuba, Bruno Rodriguez, held his first in-person press conference with the international accredited diplomats. He spoke about the different aggression by the United States against Cuba, and they had tracked about 29 different US officials who have made public statements in the last couple of weeks, or maybe it was the last month or two leading up, or since these November 15th so-called protests were announced. And so, different people making all of these interventionist statements, warning the Cuban government, issuing warnings, promoting the protests. It's just really bizarre activity anywhere in the world. But, a lot of that was statements that were being made on Twitter and other social media. But they were saying things like, Blinken, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was saying, that the United States calls on the Cuban government to allow these peaceful protesters to demonstrate and express their opinions, and for the Cuban government to not react with violence. I mean, this is exactly what we heard in 2017 in Venezuela, that, like Ben said earlier, we were, the press was all over the place. These big agencies with powerful cameras and a whole team, extremely well funded, and they're just waiting for the setup. And it's just a whole staged incident of repression where we're in the armed paramilitary young people who, by the way, are paid, who are given drugs and alcohol and other substances to stay awake all night and to kind of engage in this sort of street violence, provoking the security forces, are sent to go, plant themselves in front of the police officers who have also been working long hours. They're supposed to be protecting property. They're supposed to be protecting neighborhoods, and trying to create an incident. And even if an incident doesn't take place, trying to find the right picture and the right angle, which makes it look as if it's this, this big, dark security force figures with their big armored vehicles or tanks, attacking these young students. And of course, we know they're not young students. It's pretty clear that these were people who are just less fortunate, addicted to different illicit substances, live on the streets, need a little bit of extra money. A few dollars makes all the difference, plus free food, plus alcohol. This is why they were participating in these different violent events in both Venezuela and Nicaragua. But no such thing has actually happened in Cuba. We didn't have the guarimbas in Cuba the way in which we had them in Venezuela. And at no time has the Cuban government used excessive force against Cuban citizens, against anyone, against journalists. It just hasn't happened. And anyone who's ever been to Havana or been to Cuba should know what the situation is like. It's literally a country of law and order. It is a country of rules, of peace and tranquility. But the state really has control of things. And there really hasn't been a moment when things got out of hand. There was just one day for a period of hours in July where there were protests that we haven't seen. I mean, it really says a lot that, the media had to break out into coverage on this, but they really weren't able to capture any actual instances of repression or any such thing. But yet, at the same time, we have on Twitter all of these fake bot accounts accusing the government of using excessive force and brutalizing people, young people, activists, suggesting that these might be Afro-Cuban people, which is also bizarre. If Black Afro-descendant people are oppressed in Cuba, you should know that they're the majority of people, that the majority of Cubans and all Cubans are oppressed because all are Afro-descendant. This is a Black country, is an African-descended country. We should not be using identity politics to try to obscure the facts here, making it seem as if Black people are the minority in a country where everybody comes from an African descendancy. It's very important to try to not make it seem as if, the reality, of course, in Cuba is that on a systemic level, these sorts of inequalities have been eliminated. They still exist because this is a country that has the same history of colonization as every other country in our region. And so, of course, these different modalities of work and plantations and slavery, enslavement, and exploitation existed, and also, discrimination and bigotry that is racism based on race, based on class, and based on gender, of course, as well. But that these things have been on a systemic level been eliminated by the Cuban state. And so we're going to continue to see, some of these issues for years to come, but they exist, as a, in kind of these are dwindling, and we're seeing the ways in which, these countries, specifically Nicaragua and Cuba, are leading in gender equality, and where, Black revolutionaries are in leadership positions.